All right, this video is for our collective member, Danny. Had a great question about breaking down pricing strategy, how to price things within a painting company. Keep in mind that this video is, of course, you can turn on Spanish subtitles. There's some options down below that you go through, closed captioning, search for your language. You can put on the subtitles in your own language. Of course, Danny, of course, speaks perfect English. And so we're going to do this whole thing in English. And ideally, everybody can enjoy and learn something. Pricing, when it comes down to it, is a math problem. And it is not a complex math problem, but there are multiple steps. And so we're going to kind of break down each of these and kind of shift the way that we think about pricing things in a way that is going to be a lot easier to calculate, monitor, project. All these things are going to be easier if we just kind of shift our mindset up front and we understand that we have to kind of get away from hourly based payment models. Now, the hourly based system, just to give you some background, the hourly based system comes from a concept called time and material, where you charge for your time and you charge for your material. A lot of craftsmen, laborers, business owners, they start with this or some kind of derivation of it because that's where they come from. They started off laboring as a hourly worker or a day laborer, and they were paid for their time. And so when you decide, okay, I'm going to break off on my own, I'm going to hang my own shingle. I was making $20 an hour. I would like to make $30 an hour, give myself a raise. So that's kind of where it comes from. And there's some major issues with time and material. But there's some protections as well. So the thing with time and material, the nice thing is that, well, if you're able to charge pure time and material, then you're going to get paid for the time that you put into the job, regardless of how long it takes. The downside is that it's harder to sell, and people don't really value your time as much as you think that they should. And also, when you start to get different people on the job site, you have different skill levels. And so you might have a slow painter, and they take more time. And if you're charging like a flat $65 per hour, then that customer is going to pay a lot more for the slower work. Whereas if you have a fast worker, they're going to take less time. And if you charge the same hourly rate, well, now the customer's getting a steal, right? And so why would we punish the customer by giving them a slow worker? And why would we punish the company by giving them a fast worker? And so we really need to kind of break the mindset of this idea of time and material and recognize that the value is not based on the time that's being put into it. The value is actually based on what the customer is getting. And so, this concept of value and value-based estimating is really, really important, okay? So the thing is, when you start a job, you have kind of at the floor level, there is a cost associated with it, which is primarily the labor and the materials, right? But anybody can provide labor and materials. Anybody can do that. It might not be good labor, it might not be good materials, and the customer might have to micromanage the job, okay? Because if all they're paying for is labor and materials, and they're not paying for that management piece and that training piece, then they're probably going to get somebody that is not going to give them an experience that is really worth paying for. It can really turn into a nightmare experience. And if you ask your customers, have you ever had a nightmare experience with a contractor? It's usually because they went with somebody cheap that doesn't know how to manage their projects very well. They really need management in place. And so then the customer had to play manager. And you know what? They probably don't want to deal with that, right? And so we add layer. So this is kind of our cost of the job. And so what we do is we kind of add in this layer of management that adds extra value, right? And so this here, the value of the job, that's the extra portion that you're charging in order to manage the job, in order to make the experience more enjoyable, pain-free. You know, these customers don't have the time to be managing painters on the job site and their own jobs and their own lives and everything, right? And so the cost of the job plus the value that you provide, that's part of it. But then there's this added value, okay? And this added value comes from the extra special stuff, right? So the added value is things like the actual quality of the work. So if the quality of the work is above and beyond what other people can get, that's added value. You know, I think about my friend Zach Kinney, who his painting work is more. It's more fine arts than a trade, to be honest. Like it's truly beautiful work, and his added value allows him to charge so much more than the cost of actually doing the work because of the league that he's in terms of quality. Like it's just a different level. It's a work of art and it has added value. For a lot of us in regular kind of house painting where it's part utility, it's part desire. We're kind of hovering in this space of it has to be affordable. It can be more expensive than our competitors, but if it's going to be more expensive than our competitors, then we need to prove why we have added value and why that added value is above and beyond what our competitors are charging, right? And so we can't just charge extra money for the sake of charging extra money. The customer has to get something out of it. And so the price that you provide minus the cost is this value piece, right? The extra value. So kind of keep that in mind as you are developing your sales process, that we want to be focusing more on what the customer is going to get, what their end result is, rather than placing the value on the cost, okay? How much labor and time and all that, because honestly, they just don't really care about that, right? And so let's keep that concept in mind as we start to shift our conceptual thinking away from the dollar per hour and towards unit pricing, okay, unit-based pricing. And so unit-based pricing is where you basically quantify how much of a unit is in a house, and we attach a price to that unit, right? So the easy example of unit pricing would be doors, right? We can really easily talk about doors. So let's say that we are painting a bunch of doors, and that's like the only thing that they want us to paint, and they have 20 doors in the house, right? And so what we have to figure out is, okay, what is it going to cost us to produce these doors, to get them painted? Let's say 2 coats per side. And we have to understand how much it's going to cost us per door. Now, the challenge is we have in our industry conflicting business models. And I say conflicting only because they're conflicting in the sense of the payout structure is different. But you could be hiring W-2 workers, or you could be hiring W-9 workers, right? And depending on your state and depending on your desires and the desires of your crew, you could be paying one way or the other. The idea with W-2 workers is that, of course, you have to pay them at least minimum wage. Of course, in order for them to accept the job, your state minimum wage or the federal minimum wage is probably not going to be close to enough. And so you're going to have to pay them much more than the federal minimum wage. But you also have to pay them for their overtime work. You also have to provide workers' compensation, and you have to take care of their payroll taxes and all that kind of stuff. And so you might have a price per hour. That's the other thing, is that they're what's called non-exempt employees, meaning that they have to get paid per hour, and they have to be paid fairly for the time, right? That's where the conflict comes, because for the customer, we're not charging them by the hour. We're giving them an estimate, right? And regardless of whether you count up how many average hours it's going to take, and then you give them a price tag of, $10,000 or whatever it is, well, that budget, that price, that's not going to move, right? Based on how many hours these W-2 workers actually work, that's not going to move. Your workers could, keep working and keep working and keep working. So, for example, this door could take them, it could take them 20 minutes, it could take them 40 minutes, it could take them an hour, and what you actually pay them is based off of how much time they take to do it, right? That's the conflict. You're going to give the customer a set price for this door, but you're going to give the worker an hourly rate, which is going to be variable. That's the challenge. With W-9, you're giving the customer a flat rate, and then you're giving the W-9 worker a flat rate as well. Now, this has its ups and downs. The upside is that you won't lose money on that door. This person could take an hour, 2 hours, 5 days to do this door, and they're going to get paid the same amount. The downside to that is that it puts a tremendous amount of pressure and burden on this worker to get it done fast. And so the faster that they try to move, often that can decrease the quality, okay? Especially if they don't have the skill. Now, higher skill they are, the faster they can do it. And so this ends up working for some people. However, you have to factor in the fact that they are paying their own taxes, their own self-employment tax, their own insurances, their own workers' comp. They're paying for their own tools. And so if we're purely looking at this as what a person is making by the hour, what happens is the payroll burden that you have here, it actually just gets shifted to the W-9 worker, okay? And because they're taking on added risk, they can actually be more expensive. If you don't know how to manage your employees, and you don't know how to hold them accountable, and you don't know how to bid in the first place, it can feel like employees are much more expensive. But if you have these things dialed in, the W-9 workers is naturally going to be more expensive. And so there are trade-offs. There are trade-offs either way. And my personal belief is that when possible, W-2 is probably the way to go. There are certain instances where I think that working with a contract worker for overflow, or when they're exceptionally good at their craft, their specialty at it, and they don't need to work for anybody, they work for themselves, but they will do a job for you, and they'll do it really good. So if this person is really high quality and does really, really great work, and understands the rules associated and the risk that they're carrying, I'm okay with it. But a lot of these workers, they should probably be W-2. Okay, so regardless of the methodology here that you're paying them, the fact is that this door is going to cost you a certain amount to paint it, right? And so let's just say that we start the cost right here, and let's say that painting this door is going to cost you 60% of what you can charge, okay? And I want to use this number 60% because it's a number that I think a lot of contractors who use W-9, I think they actually find themselves in this position more often than not. I think online we hear a lot of people saying, "Oh, I only pay 40%, or I pay 45, or whatever." But the fact is that one of the hallmarks of the W-9 is that they can negotiate the price on a contract per contract basis. And so if they're shrewd negotiators and you're in a pinch, they're going to try and get as much money as they can. And so I think a lot of people actually find themselves in this 60% range more often than not. And that makes it tough because if all you have left is 40% of the job, then you have to figure out how to make ends meet on this smaller slice of the pie. But we'll figure out through this video we'll figure out how to kind of shift the mindset and the mentality for everybody so that it's still equitable and fair, but that you have greater flexibility to charge what you need to, assuming that you kind of follow this process here. Okay, so the idea with the unit price is that we're going to take the customer, and we're going to say, okay, you've got 20 doors, and I'm going to charge, I'm just going to use easy math here, and I'm going to say we're going to charge $100 per door, right? And if it's $100 per door, then we're looking at, $2,000 to paint all of these doors, okay? Pretty simple math there, right? So if that's 2,000, 2,000 doors, then, okay, I'm gonna have to do a little bit math on the fly. So it looks like this would be $1,200 for the labor costs, and then $800 in your gross profit, or what I'll start calling and referring to as contribution margin. Okay, they're basically the same thing, not a tremendous amount of difference, but I'm going to use the word contribution margin. Okay, so you can check my math on this because I did it in my head. It could be wrong. We're not going to hold on to these numbers for very long, but this is the basic idea, right? You're gonna pay this out to the doing the job. We'll assume that we've balanced our payroll burden with the sub so that what we're paying our employees plus the payroll burden is inclusive of the same amount. So we're just going to assume that it's about the same amount, okay? And then you're going to get the $800 out of this, right? 20 doors times $100, $2,000. That's what you got, right? That's basic unit pricing. But what this doesn't take into account, again, is that added value, right? Because if every single job that you went to, you said it was $100 to paint the door, I can guarantee you that some people are going to think that that's too much for a door, and some people are going to think that they're getting a steal. And so how do we customize these prices in a way that allows us to maximize our profits while being the most fair and reasonable to the customer? Well, we do price customization, and to kind of illustrate price customization and how it works and why it works, we'll take a concept of we'll go into a different industry. Like let's say that we are selling cans of Coca-Cola, right? And we'll assume, for the sake of this example, that it costs us nothing to acquire the Coke. Like let's just assume that we, made some kind of a bet and we won, 100 cases of Coke. And so now we're going to sell these cases of Coke. Well, let's say that we have, 4 different consumers. We've got Mark, we've got Juan, we've got Sally, and then we've got, Maria. And each of them has a different willingness to pay for this Coke for whatever reason, just their own personal preference or thought or need. Maybe some of them are more thirsty than others. Maybe Sally is a little bit more, health conscious, and so, she'll drink it in a pinch, but she doesn't really want to, right? So, maybe what we have here is, Mark is willing to pay $3, a maximum of $3, and he'd be pretty happy if he got the Coke for $3. Juan is willing to pay, let's say, $2. Sally would pay we'll just say $1, And then Maria, let's say that she would pay, $1.50, right? And there are a lot of circumstances to why, they would pay one or the other, right? There could be convenience. Kind of a funny anecdote. When I was in high school, the administration of our school decided that pop was unhealthy, and so they removed all of the pop from the vending machines in the school and stopped selling it altogether. You couldn't buy pop on the school campus. And so me and my friends, being a little enterprising and maybe conniving at worst, we went down, and I had a job at Target. And so I went down and got my employee discount, bought a bunch of pop, and started selling pop out of our backpacks. And so, the thing is that what was funny is my first thought was that my customer is just going to be the other kids, right? And so I would come up to them during the lunchroom, during lunch, and I'd be like, I was acting kind of shady, and I'd be like, I got what you need, I got what you need, and I'd be like kind of holding my bag like this, and they'd be like, well, what do you got? And then I'd open it up, and it'd be a bunch of cans of pop. They thought it was drugs, but it was pop. And then they were like, oh, well, how much, right? So I can't remember what we sold it for, but what I realized was that the willingness of the students to pay was a little bit lower than a handful of the teachers. Now, some of the teachers, I mean, a lot of the teachers just, they put a stop on it. We got in trouble. But some of the teachers, they were like, I can't get through my day without my Coke. And so I was actually able to sell the Coke to the teachers for a higher price than I was to the students, right? And that's price customization, right? They were willing to pay more because they needed it more and they valued it more, right? So the question is, how much should we charge for this Coke? Assuming that we see, Mark willing to pay $3, Juan paying $2, Sally paying $1, Maria buying it for $2.50 or $1.50. Well, let's say that we thought, well, going from $1.50 to $2 isn't that big of a stretch, and $3, well, we're not going to sell it to anybody but Mark. So let's just pick $1.75 as our price, right? And hope that we can sell it to everybody. Well, that's not going to happen, because what will happen is Maria says, $1.75, I'm out. Sally says, $1.75, I only have $1, I'm out. Meanwhile, Juan and Mark, they'll buy it, but they were willing to buy it for more. So now what you're getting is it's going to be let's see, that's 75, so 150, 2, 3. So now you're getting $3.50 when if you had charged $2 or $3, you could have had $5. Well, what if we were able to charge Mark $3 and Juan $2 and Sally $1 and Maria $1.50? Well, then what we have is 5, 6, 7, $7.50. We've made $7.50 compared to the $3.50 because we were able to customize the price to our clients. Keep in mind, this doesn't cost us anything, right? And so if we go back to the concept of painting, then what we understand is that we have, again, let's take this door. We have a cost of the door. How much it cost us. Anything that we charge above the cost is going to contribute to our profit. Okay? And so what we have to figure out is, what is the willingness of each consumer to pay for this job so that they get exactly what they want. And you may have to add a little bit of extra management, a little bit of extra service, a little bit of extra higher end products or extra prep, right? you might have to add that stuff to it to increase the value. Or, and this is the thing that I think a lot of people miss, is you take away from the value, right? That one is really important because so many people just think, how can I make more money? How can I make more money? How can I make more money? But if we go back to Sally and Maria, who were not willing to pay $3 or even the $1.75, what can we do to lower our costs so that we can still service them? And that's going to be the key to keeping your schedule busy throughout the year. And it comes from a concept called surge pricing. Surge pricing Okay, surge pricing basically says, let's figure out what the supply and the demand is, right? Here's what we call our demand curve, and here's our supply curve. And this is the number of sales, and this is the price, okay? So the higher the price, the lower the demand. These are the sales. So if you have a really high price, then you're realistically going to have fewer sales. But if you lower your price, you're going to have more sales. Well, what also happens with supply, so this is demand and this is supply. What happens with supply is that supply increases when the price increases, meaning that if you can charge a lot of money for services, more people are going to enter into the market because they want to get in while the getting's good, right? But if you can't charge very much, then supply is going to be very low because fewer people are going to be able to make what they need to make in their lives. And so what happens is as the price goes up, the demand goes down. And what we find is a Goldilocks number, a sweet spot of what to charge so that we have enough supply of labor, the demand is where we need it to be, the sales are where we need it to be, and the price is where we need it to be. But this changes throughout the year. So in the winter time, when things slow down, usually due to holiday shopping, what happens is the demand goes down, but the supply becomes available. And because the supply goes up and the demand goes down, the price point ends up going down. So demand drops, right? And so the price ends up dropping too. However, in the summertime, when demand increases, what happens? Well, the supply actually goes down, and so the price goes up. So how do we figure that out? How do we figure out how much we should be charging depending on the season? Well, let's back it up a little bit. Let's back it up to the basics of how to calculate price. So we first have to understand what our cost is, right? Now, if we hire employees, we have to figure out what our minimum wage of our company is going to be. What is the lowest amount of money that we can put out there in a job ad that will attract an entry-level employee, an apprentice, say, right? Now, you are not going to be able to pay people who have more skills the same as you would pay an apprentice, obviously, but we have to start there. We have to start at this amount. So the apprentice, let's say in your market, and this is going to change from state to state and region to region, but let's say that they have to they won't bite on the job unless it's $15 an hour. Okay. Now you may, again, you're adding in labor burden, right? So the actual cost of this is going to be somewhere between probably $18 to $20 per hour to just hire this $15 an hour person. And depending on their skill level, so if you have somebody who, like this is, your apprentice, entry-level apprentice, but let's say that you have somebody who is twice as good, some level of journeyman, they're twice as fast, twice as productive, and the quality is high, and you don't have to babysit them. Well, they might be demanding double because they're twice as good and they're twice as profitable. So they might actually cost you $30 per hour. So herein lies the discrepancy, because if I'm to charge a flat hourly rate to my customer, and I got the cost being $15 an hour versus $30 an hour, well, my profit margins are all over the map. And so what we need to do is we need to convert this into the units, right? We need to convert this into unit production. And so the idea here, if I take just this apprentice here, and I'm paying them $15 an hour, then what I need them to be able to do is I need them to be able to produce at least 1 unit of production every hour. And so their production rate becomes 1 unit, or we'll call it a point, per hour. So let's take the door, for example. Okay, if we're going to call this door 1 unit, then the expectation is that this apprentice can paint this door in 1 hour. Okay, 2 coats, right? If they have to add the door frame, and maybe it needs to be caulked, or maybe it needs to be sanded down or something, right? And we're going to call this a unit for the frame. This apprentice needs to be able to paint this frame in 1 hour or less. Let's say that we have a window. Okay, same thing. We're going to give this a point, and we're going to expect that this apprentice can paint it in 1 hour because it's 1 point. Now, if we gave them a window and a door and a frame, that would be 3 points. They would have 3 hours to do it, and it would cost us $45 to produce this, because the expectation is that it would take them an hour for each one, right? Now, I know what you're thinking. That's very slow. It is. They're an apprentice. Apprentices are slow. So let's take a look at it if we were actually talking about the journeyman, the one that is twice as fast, who's getting $30 per hour, which means that if they're twice as fast, then they need to produce 2 points per hour. Okay? And so they're going to do the door and the door frame in an hour, and they're going to do the window in half an hour, which means that instead of taking 3 hours to do this, they take an hour and a half, right? And so because they took an hour and a half, you take an hour and a half times 30, and what do you get? $45, and your cost stays the same. Okay? This is really key information here, because what we want to be able to do is we want to be able to make sure that our margins are predictable as possible. And so let's say that this is actually we're not using employees, and we're not paying them by the hour, but instead we're paying subcontractors. And the subcontractor, up to this point, we've been paying them a percentage of the job. So let's say that we charge $100 for this door and this frame and this window, which these are examples. So, but let's say that that's what we're charging. Then if we are giving the subcontractor 60%, then he's going to get $60 for each of these, which means that he's going to get $180, right? Well, that's obviously more than the $45 that we were, or I'm sorry, that's not right. 60%. It's $60. All right, you probably caught that instantly, my bad. So $100 times 60%, he is getting $60, right? Oh, I know where I went with this, because there are 3 of these, right? So times 3, the door, the window, and the frame, and that's $180, right? $180, okay? So yes, we are comparing this $180 that it costs to produce these doors to the $45 that it costs us with the employees, right? So obviously, the subcontractor in this model would have a little more incentive to be a subcontractor than to be an employee, right? But there are trade-offs, right? They have to deal with their own taxes. They have to deal with their own, their own insurances, their own tools, and they have to get work from other people, so they can't rely on you for work year round. And so maybe the employee wants to be able to just have one steady job. Maybe that's what they want. But then the thing is that if they are a faster worker, then this might not be so bad, right? Um, okay, so we'll we'll move on to the next. I think that you got this part here, right? I think that all makes sense. So with that subcontractor, instead of going for a straight percentage, what a better move would be is to negotiate a price per unit. Okay? Because if we could go, I'll recreate this here. Window, door, and then we got the frame around the door. Okay? So if this is 3 points total, or 3 units, then what we want to be able to do is we want to be able to actually negotiate a price per unit, right? And so what we might say is, hey, can you give me these points for $20, right? All right, $20 per point equals $60, all right? Equals $60. And they might look at this and they might say, all right, if I could do a door and a frame and it would take me, let's say, 45 minutes, and then this window I could do in, I don't know, 30 minutes, then what we have is an hour and 15 minutes, right? And so if I can do this if I can make $60 in an hour and 15 minutes, now my question is that worth it to me? Can I do that? Is that worth it to me? Well, I think a lot of workers on the front lines would probably accept that. I think that's reasonable, right? Now, but they might be a little bit slower. And so they might look at this and think, well, it's a window and that's going to take me 45 minutes. The frame is going to take me half an hour, and then the door is going to take me another half an hour. And so I'm actually at 1 hour and 45 minutes. And so now they're looking at it and they're thinking, 60, it's almost 2 hours. That's around $30 an hour. Can I make that work? That's what they're negotiating with themselves, right? Can I make that work? And some are going to say yes and some are going to say no, right? That's the reality of it. And so we just have to kind of find that sweet spot. So what we want to end up negotiating is this number right here, the $20 per point, right? We can go up, we can go down, but let's say we start the negotiation off at $20 per hour. Well, now what we understand is we understand what our cost is. And so if we go back to this kind of chart of cost, and then you have the value, and then you have the added value. So now we know that our cost is about $20 per point or per unit. That's important to know. What we have to figure out now is how much do we charge for the value in order to break even? Because this line right here is going to be our break even price. Okay? Your break even is the amount of money that you earn on top of the cost of the job in order to pay your fixed expenses of your company as well as your salary, okay? Your base salary. And what we're going to do is we're going to create a model around a base salary of $100,000, okay? Because it's, in my opinion, why shoot for anything less, right? So we're going to shoot for $100,000. We're going to create a model where our break even gets us $100,000 in income, and it pays for our expenses. The added value is going to be that additional profit that you earn north of $100,000, so that you can do more stuff with more money. I guess, I don't know, whatever you want to do. So let's create a model that focuses on these things. Now, what I mentioned is that in order to calculate our break even, we are going to have to understand a handful of math principles and formulas. They're not hard. It's basic arithmetic. It's really not hard. Maybe even algebra, but not really. I mean, yeah, technically, but it's really basically just plus, minus, multiplication, division. That's all you really need to know here, okay? And so the first thing that we're going to do is we're going to calculate what our fixed expenses are, right? Or our fixed costs. What are the fixed costs of business? Well, a fixed cost is anything that it takes to run the business. It could be your it can be the vehicle expenses. It could be your phone. It could be internet. It could be office. It could be tools that you buy. It could be marketing ad spend that you purchase. Any of those business expenses that aren't directly tied to the job. Okay, the expenses that are tied to the job are materials and labor and maybe rentals, right? And so those are called variable costs. So we have to figure out, these are the first two things that we need to figure out. What are our fixed costs? What are our variable costs? Well, in this example, let's say that our business expenses are totaling at around $3,600. And we're going to add to that an income of $100K, which is going to have to be, we're going to round up, it'll be $8,400 on a monthly basis. This is we're going on a month here, right? And these total together is about 12,000. Okay, so our fixed costs are $12,000 a month, which with this really nice salary, that feels a little high. These fixed costs, I think, are pretty manageable. Could you get them lower? Yeah, right. And if you get these fixed costs lower, what happens is that any money revenue just goes straight to your income, which is beautiful. And so we'll just call it that, right? We'll just say that our fixed costs are going to be $12,000 in a month. Well, we mentioned it before that let's say that you had that shrewd negotiator of a subcontractor, and that your current variable costs are 60% of the job. We're going to take materials out of that, okay? And so again, if you've done this job, or if you've done the negotiation to where your materials are included in this, let's take them out, okay? Let's take them out because I want you to get the markup on the materials. And so take the materials out, set them aside, and let's talk labor only, okay? So let's say that 60% is what it's going to cost to actually get this job done. Well, again, that's tricky because the thing is if you bid it high, then they're gonna do really, really well, and maybe they're not going to work any harder for it, so you're just kind of giving them a bonus without them doing anything to earn it. However, if you bid it low, now they're taking a financial hit because you underbid it, and 60% turns out it just wasn't enough, right? And that's actually probably why they keep negotiating up in percentage, because they want, because maybe there was a couple jobs where you bid it too low, and they're like, we didn't make enough on this, and so we need a higher percentage. And then you get back to the summertime, and you've bid it up high again, and now they're making great money, and so it's all over the place. So we're gonna move out of this, but for right now, we'll stick to it. Okay. So let's say then that if we want to move to that unit cost, then we're going to give a price per unit. Okay, so our price per unit, and I've been using units of points, but honestly you can use units of other things. Let me go on a quick tangent here. So the point is going to be an amount of work that is, it's 20 to 30 minutes or 20 to 60 minutes worth of work, depending on who's doing it. If they're lower level, they don't have much experience, it's going to take them 60 minutes to do the point. If they're really fast and advanced, it's going to be 20. Most, I would say that most like really good painters are probably somewhere in the range of like 40 to 50 minutes, or I'm sorry, reverse that. They're usually in around 30 to 25 minutes per point. Those are really good. I think it's kind of hard to get to 20 minutes per point, but there are people who do it. All right, so what we're gonna do is we're gonna take, we mentioned that the doors, the frames, and the windows, we mentioned that those were 1 point per unit, right? So every door that you count out, you just give it 1 point. Well, how do we do walls and trim and stuff like that and ceilings? Well, there's just it's very simple, okay? So with walls, what we're going to do is we're going to take the total square footage, and then we're going to divide it by 32. And that will give you the total points, okay? And then for ceilings, we're going to take the square footage of the ceiling and we're going to divide it by 21, and that will give you the points. And then for trim, anything linear, so like trim, like baseboards, chair rail, crown molding, and stuff like that, you're going to just take the linear foot and divide it by 16, and that will give you the number of points. So now we've converted everything into points. And so, let's say that we have a room that is like let's just call it a small small room. It's 13 feet by 13 feet exactly, and you calculate the square footage, 8-foot walls, and what that means is that these walls are going to be 13 points. Okay, and you do the same with the ceilings, and that's going to be like 5 points rounded. And then with the trim, you're going to do the divide it by 16, take the linear foot, divide it by 16, and you're going to end up with around 3 points rounded. Okay. And so if we take, let's say that we have a door, a frame, and a window in that room, which means that there's 3 points, and we add all of this up together, that means that we've got 16, 21, 24, 24 points are in this room. And so now what we're gonna figure out is like, how do we cost this room out, this 24-point room out? Well, if it's 24 points, and we know that from the previous example that we're going to start the negotiation at $20 a point of cost, we're going to take 24 times 20, which is going to be a cost of $480. That's the cost of the room, right? And so if that's our cost, and our cost is 60%, then we need to figure out how much to charge above that, right? And so let's see here. I'm gonna need assistance here. So, hey Siri, what is 24 times 33?
24 times 33 is 792.
Okay, so what you're gonna do is you're gonna, if your variable cost right now is 60%, then you're gonna mark this up to a price of 792 for this same room where we're doing the doors, frames, walls, windows, trim, ceiling, everything, right? So we're going to mark it up to 792. That's going to be the price that we give the customer, and the cost is going to be that, which means that our price per unit is $33 per point. Okay, and at that, what we can discover. So if we got 33, that's going to cost about $20 per point, rounded. Okay. So if our labor costs are $20 per point and our price per unit is $33 per point, that means that our contribution margin is going to be $33 minus 20. So the price that we charge minus the number of minus the cost of the points, which is going to equal 13. Now, you might be looking at this and thinking, well, I'm still in this mindset of I want to get $65 per hour. So how is this like this is like half? Well, no, it's not half, because the reality is that this is based off of the idea of an apprentice doing the work. But if somebody who is twice as fast as an apprentice is doing the work, then you're actually earning twice the money, right? So if you're charging $33 per point and your team, the people that you hire, can do 2 points per hour, what you're actually charging is double that, right? You're charging $66 per hour. So we're right in the same ballpark. We're just kind of moving the math around to turn this into unit economics so that we are paying the apprentices appropriately, but we're also paying the people who are more advanced appropriately. So your contribution margin in this case ends up being $13 per point. So if you are going to charge, if you're going to calculate this room at 24 points and charge $33 per point, then what you get out of this is the $13 per point, which in this case, let me use my assistant again. Hey Siri, what is 24 times 13?
24 times 13 is 312.
So what you end up getting from this is $312, and that's your contribution margin, right? The best way to think about a contribution margin, it's the margin, right? They add a margin that contributes to your fixed costs and your salary, okay? It's the money that contributes to those fixed costs. And so from here, we have to figure out, okay, well, what is our contribution margin percentage, right? And so, or the ratio. So we're going to call it the CM ratio. And we get that by dividing 13 by 33, and that equals 0.4, okay? So 0.4, or if we express it as a percentage, it's 40%. And we know we're in balance with that because 40% is the contribution margin, and our variable costs are 60%. 60 plus 40% is 100%. And so we know that all of our finances in the job are accounted for. So now what we need to do with this number, this is probably the most important number of this whole thing, is we need to figure out what our break-even price is, okay? So there are two break-even prices. So I'm going to erase some of this here. So we want to understand what is the break-even price per unit. Okay, and we also want to know what is the break-even price per sales, right? For our sales. So what we're going to do is we're going to take this fixed cost number right here, the 12,000, and we're going to divide it by the contribution margin. And this is to find how many units we need to sell. So if we need $12,000 to cover our fixed costs, then and we earn a break even of $13 per point, then we're going to take the $12,000 and divide it by the $13 per point, and that's going to give us 923 points, meaning that we have to sell 923 points every month. Okay, what does that look like in money? In terms of money, well, we're going to take that same $12,000. We're going to divide it by our contribution margin ratio, the 0.4. You could do this in a calculator, and that's going to equal $30,000 a month. So we have to sell $30,000 a month in order to earn the $12,000 after our labor costs, okay? But that's just labor. So keep that in mind, because you're going to add your materials on top of that, and so your your actual sales might look closer to 40,000. But we're just talking about labor right now. So you have to, in order to clear this with your labor, in order to earn $12,000, you need to clear $30,000 in sales at a cost of $20 per point. The problem with going straight percentage with your deal is that you don't know if you're actually charging $20 per point or not. You could be charging less than that, you could be charging more than that. Because a lot of times we go through the job and we put together arbitrary, production rates that we don't really know if they're accurate or not, and we just assume that they're close, and we give away 60% of the job. We don't know if they're making, we don't know if the sub's making the money that they need to make, and we don't know if we're making the money that we need to make. But if we flip this on its head and we start charging by the unit, then we can actually have measurable results. Okay. So what does all this mean? Well, if this is just a per monthly basis, but if we look at this in terms of total sales for the year, and we just take our this amount here and multiply it by 12, keep in mind seasonal ups and downs, so it's not going to be a straight even thing, right? But the total is that we are going to sell a total of $360,000. That's total labor sales. Okay, we've just created $100,000 income break even with $360,000 in total revenue. The total points on that is going to be 11,076. Okay, so how many painters do we need for that? Well, let's say that the painter, and here I'm going to be doing some math on in my head about that. Let's say that your average painter can do 2 points per hour, and let's say that they work 40 hours a week, and let's say that they work for I don't know, let's say they work like 11 months out of the year, so that's about 48 weeks. So that is going to be, we're going to take 48 weeks times 40 hours times 2. Let's have our assistant help us with this. Hey Siri, what is 48 times 40 times 2?
48 times 40 times 2 is 3,840.
So each painter is going to have to produce 3,840 points in a year. And so to figure out how many painters that is, we're going to take the total number of points and divide it by the number of points per painter. Let's have help with this. Hey Siri, what is 11,076 divided by 3,840?
11,076 divided by 3,840 is approximately 2.8843.
2.8, which is, we'll round it to 3 painters throughout the year, producing $360,000 worth of work. They're going to have to be pretty good painters, right? But the question is, if $100,000 is a good income for you, can you sift through the best of the best to find the 3 and keep them busy all year round? I think that you can. All right, so let's talk about the added value. Because, as I mentioned, you have the cost, which we're putting at $20 per point. You have the added, or you have the value, which is your, the fact that you marketed, you sold it, and you're managing, right? That value we're putting at $13 per point. That is $33 per point. Okay, and that's your break even. But what about the added value? Is the customer willing to pay more than the $33 per point? The answer is yes, they are. Because they have desires for the job to get done right. They have desires for speed. They have desires for quality. They have desires to have a better brand in their, they want to work with a good brand, right? A reputable brand. So to me, the added value here is sometimes it's the speed at which you're able to get to the job. If you can get to the job before the competitor, if you can get the job done before the competitor, you have added value. If you can get it done with higher quality than your competitor, that's added value. That's things that customer is willing to pay above your break even, right? By the way, this also might even be at or below the current market rate. And so if that's at or below the current market rate, which remember, if your painters are producing 2 points per hour, you're at around $66 per hour, maybe the customers are willing to pay more. We have to figure that out. But the thing that they will most assuredly, if you can't compete on speed and you can't compete, you should be able to compete on quality, but speed is the main thing. And if you can't compete on price, then what people will buy for is brand reputation. So if you have an excellent reputation and you are able to convey that, people will wait for you and they will love you and they will pay more money from you. You don't want to gouge them, but the question is, how much more can you charge than the 33? Can you charge 38, 45, 50? Right? And so what we need to figure out is, at what point of the year can I charge more or less? Well, the way that we're going to look at that is by how busy our crew is and how the lead volume is. And we're going to create little rules of thumb for ourselves. So if it's the dead of winter, I might be at this 33 mark. But if my volume is going up, my call volume is going up, my sales is increasing, then I might charge a little more to keep up with demand. And when at the peak of summer, I might be charging my most, and I might never be able to get up here in my market. Once the season slows down and I see that things are kind of cooling off, I go back down. Okay? And so what we might see is we hit our break even at $33 per point, but then maybe peak season, we're at $45 a point. And maybe the spring rush, maybe we're closer to 38. And maybe as the season cools off, we go back down and we're maybe at 35. And then winter hits again and we're at our winter rates at 33. Okay? And so what that allows us to do is in the winter months, we're still going to have prices that are going to hit our break even so that we're guaranteed to hit this $100,000. But for the bulk of the season, we're actually way above board. And so this 100K very easily turns into 120, 150, 175 because you're able to charge more and because your costs have stayed at this $20 per point. Okay? You are able to more because of the added value that you brought. But the cost on these jobs, it typically stays the same. Now, what you can do is you can do profit sharing. So maybe you don't, maybe you hit this 150 and you're like, you know what, guys, I'm going to share some of this with you. And so you split 25K across your 3 painters for the season. Maybe that's what you do. You know, maybe that's the reward. But the point is here is that if we understand what our costs are and we move away from hours and percentages and we go straight to cost per unit, what that allows us to do is it allows us to pay the people fairly according to what they are able to produce. So $20 per point. Well, if I can produce 1 point per hour because I'm slow, I mean, that's really slow, then $20 per point is probably worth it. That's my value, right? If I can do 2 points per hour, well, that's $40 per point, right? Or it's still 30. So I'm sorry. So it's $40 per hour. So if I can do 2 points and it's $40 per point or $20 per point, then I am making $40 an hour. If I'm really fast and the quality stays high and it's $20 per point, I produce 3 points per hour, then I'm making $60 per hour, right? And that might be pretty good, right? It just kind of depends on who they are and how much they want. Now, should you negotiate? Yes, absolutely. But now you have the tool to understand that if this number goes up, then this number doesn't, right? So let's say that they say, you know what, I actually need $22 per point instead of $20 per point. You can say, okay, that's fine. That means my break even is now $35 per point. Okay? Because you've calculated what your contribution margin is. And so if you change it, if their price goes up, obviously your price to the customer is going to go up, but you know what your break even is. And so what you might understand is that you can say, okay, yeah, well, since we're in the spring, I can afford to pay you more, And so now my break even is 35, but I'm still charging 38. So I'm still hitting my contribution margin, and I'm still, getting the added value. And so sure, I can afford to pay more. But then as the season goes on, you say, hey, look, the demand is dropping. I can't sell these jobs at these high prices. And so we have to lower our prices, and we'll come back to it in the summer. But right now, I need to negotiate with you to go back down to $20 per point, right? And that's just the reality, because for all of you, the question is, do we get jobs or do we not? And I would say that I would be taking a look at the schedule, and I would say, how far do we want to be booked out? Because timing and urgency impacts timing and urgency impacts your sales rate. And so, if this is the timeline on my schedule, and we've got we'll go 2, 4, 6, 8, 2 weeks, 4 weeks, 6 weeks, 8 weeks out, and the number of jobs that we have, if our schedule is out just 2 weeks, that probably feels a little thin. And if the lead volume isn't in, then what should we do? Well, we should be closer to our break even, right? But if we have jobs scheduled out 6 weeks, right? Well, then we can go up a little bit, and maybe we're at our 38. But if we've got jobs booked out 8 weeks or more, and people are calling and you're saying, well, we're scheduled about 8 weeks, and they're saying, I can't wait for that, then you need to charge even more. Why? Because you actually need to slow down your sales. Because what's happening is they're calling you and you're 8 weeks out, but they're also calling 3 other painters, and they're all 8 weeks out too. And so if everybody's super busy, then they're going to have no choice but to pay more money, because they need to get it done before 2 months from now. And so by slowing your sales down, maybe we slow it back down to kind of about 5 weeks, but we're charging more because of demand. Now we're maximizing our profit, and the cost of the job is staying relatively the same, but our profit margins are going up. Okay, and so that's how this works conceptually. I hope that's helpful, and we'll try to put together a little tutorial on this in Google Sheets, so you can figure out how to calculate this mathematically. Thanks.